Hi, and welcome to the Hotline, your online hotline, direct line to the women-only divorce attorneys at Hoffer Family Law. My name is Katie Carter, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm an attorney at Hoffer Family Law, a Virginia-based family law firm dedicated to representing women exclusively in divorce and custody cases. And I'm here today with Kimberly VAP, the senior loan officer at CMS Mortgage, and we're going to talk to you a little bit today about mortgages and real estate and all the things you need to know as a woman going through a divorce. Thank you, Kimberly, so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm really excited.
Good. I have a couple of questions to ask you, mostly as it relates to real estate and women going through a divorce. But my first question is, what would you advise a woman who is maybe going through a divorce and trying to, decide whether or not to keep or refinance or sell her home?
Well, there's a lot in there. It's
Yeah.
a very emotional decision. Your home, what the life you've led, if your children are there, if where your schools are. And so I think there's a tendency to try to want to stay and just to keep some stability. And um, the most important thing is trying to figure out your budget. Like, what is that really going to look like in terms of your mortgage payment, the upkeep? All of a sudden, you have a huge lawn, yeah, trees you've got to cut down, um, or you have to move and you have moving expenses. And um, there's when I'm helping someone, I mean, there's so many options, right? And even as part of going through and figuring out your settlement, do you want the house? I mean, are you taking the equity and, letting go of a 401k or liquid cash? Like, if so, would you be able to refinance to get that money out if you needed to? So I think it's just so important to really look at the entire budget, especially when you're just doing the initial discussion of what do I want, what do I need. Um, there's a lot that falls through the cracks, and so it's been really important to me to talk about that and share that because it can be very overwhelming, and you do tend to not see the whole picture until you're out of it and the decree's issued, and all of a sudden you're in it going,
Yeah.
oh my gosh,
I'm
why
gonna
did I
live
do
with
it
these
this way?
choices I made.
Right, right. Why did I do it this way? So
Yeah.
education is key.
It's always hard to make a decision in a vacuum. I think it's a good idea for most people, especially in the early stages of the divorce process, to have a conversation with a divorce lawyer where you can look at the house, like what the equity is, what it would look like if you refied, what it would look like if you sold. But not only that, look at what's in the bank accounts, what's in the retirement, what kind of support are we looking at? Because I mean, I'm sure Kimberly will probably mention this too, but if you're receiving child support or spousal support, you're going to have to receive that for a period of time before a mortgage company is going to be willing to extend a mortgage to you based on that income to you. So you want to consider all of the things because you are going to have to live with the choices that you made. You are going to have to, follow through on that. And whether you decide to refinance the house or sell the house or, buy a new house, you've got a lot of factors to consider. And it's not ever just a question of, can I afford this mortgage? I mean, the escrow account is going to increase the amount of that mortgage. You've got, like you said, the lawn care that you may not have done before. And not even just making cosmetic upgrades to the house. Say you've got, this bathroom from the 80s or the 50s, you want to fix this or whatever. It's not just getting to be able to choose to make those things. It's, well, what condition is the roof in? What condition is the HVAC in? What kind of extra
That's a really
expenses
good
are
point.
hiding there behind the walls that you might not see? And it can be hard to make that decision. It's hard to know what you can afford, like you mentioned. And I mean, that leads me perfectly to my next question, which is like, how do you begin to analyze what you can afford in this market or in any market at any point when you decide to get divorced?
Well, one of the things that doing just a regular mortgage pre-approval, um, and this is what I typically start with, is I worked with attorneys in the past, and so you don't want to go in, and you actually want to kind of start with just the basics. do an application. What is your income? What is your credit score? If do you have a credit score? Um, have you developed it? If not, you're gonna need to like start working on that. Are your assets still together? Do you have your own bank accounts? What is your income for your job now? Um, and can you qualify, right?
Yeah.
So can you actually qualify on your own to refinance or to get the house out of your ex's name? There's so starting with that is in what's the word I want to say, but it uncovers like several different factors.
Yeah.
Um, for stuff like I said, starting with credit, one, so many times people don't know what their spouse has done with accounts and putting their name on accounts that maybe they didn't even know about. And I'm sure you do this. Like one of the first things I recommend is getting a credit report and looking through it and making sure it's all yours, right? If there's something we need to clear up. So I actually work, we can do all kinds of credit plans and it's more complicated. I have people I work with that'll go in and help you fix your credit. Some things I can help you with, but that's really the first one of the very first places to go. And then, everybody wants to know what is your income going to be? I mean, are you going to have child support or alimony? Are you going to have to pay, which is also possible? And then if is your income going to change if you have to take a job with less hours because you need more time with your kids, like all of those things. So um, we look at that, like for this basic mortgage for your house now, this is what you need. And if you can't do it, then we back it out. We back down, like, okay, this is how does this feel? How much will you have left? And it's it's a process. I
Mhm.
mean, and it feeds into the other things that you do, right? Maybe you talk to your financial advisor or your accountant or, and if you own a business or you share a business,
Mhm.
you're trying to split that up. What have you claimed on your taxes? Like, what are you going to claim? Like, all of those pieces fit together. But I think women really tend to forget about the mortgage part because they just think, well, I can afford it, or I'm going to sell and rent, but there's so much to it. And I think they're also used to just going to, online and going to Rocket Mortgage and applying or something.
Yeah.
But having an actual mortgage advisor, not just a loan officer, is so key at this point. And, like me personally, like I'm not expecting you to do a mortgage with me right now. Like our goal is to just set you up. And that's just um when I don't know, my heart is with women. So I want to make sure I'm using what I've been doing this for so long, like 20 years. So I want to make sure I'm getting that information and really helping people.
I think that's a good point too. A lot of people do go to like Rocket Mortgage or something and just get some kind of basic pre-approval letter, but you offer a kind of a different service that's catered towards helping that individual person
Right.
figure out what is going to be best for her. Can you describe what that normally looks like for like a regular client or someone that you might work with? I mean, I would say
Yeah.
I always say to my client, it's good sense to meet with an attorney and meet with a financial planner, meet with a mortgage person if real estate is in question. But I don't think that most people think of you as like a resource in the same way that, if they're just trying to buy a house, they're calling just a regular real estate agent or getting a pre-approval letter. And I think you can do better than that by helping them.
Yeah, it's actually it's really amazing. It is your biggest, usually someone's biggest purchase. I mean, and like I said, I've been doing this for a very long time. And the people that I know who I've worked with that, get into retirement, or, go through a divorce, the biggest is usually their strongest piece of equity, is
Yeah.
or their like cornerstone is their house. It's so hard to save. And so what I I personally I do more of I think of myself more as a mortgage analyst, um, because I do work with a lot of financial advisors. I work with a lot of small business women, and I've worked in banks, and I can see the bigger picture and how it all fits together. So so my process, when someone calls me and they're, what are your rates, was like the first question. Frankly, that is one of the last points we should be talking about. Like wherever you go, you're going to have rates. They're going to be from
Mhm.
here to here. How much is that going to cost you? Are you going to be in the house long enough to make that back? Like there's a million other considerations before you should figure out what rate you want. It's actually one of the last things we do. Um, but what I do is I have a conversation and I'm asking all those questions. Do you want to keep this house? How long do you picture yourself living there? Is this your, do you have a payment in your head that you'd be comfortable with? If you're thinking about selling it, are you thinking about renting it? Like all of those questions. And then we do an initial application. And like I said, the space credit, income, and assets are the three biggest things we look at. And when we do that, for example, like I'll do like a soft pull on your credit. Like we don't want to start off like lowering your credit right off the bat, especially in these situations where we don't know what they are. Maybe there's so many women who have no idea. It's always been, their husband's responsibility. Um,
Yeah.
so we go through that and I walk you through, okay, this is your credit report. This is what's, negative. These are your positives. Or, we'll create a plan. We'll look at different resources. One of the things that when people don't know is that even if you've currently own a home, when you get a divorce, you are considered a first-time home buyer. And so you can access all the grants and the first time homebuyer programs. So, I look at all those and see if you qualify for any of those options.
Mhm.
If you're over 62, you could qualify for a reverse mortgage. And those are fabulous. They're actually wonderful. There's so many ways to help, especially in a divorce. They're great to help you split your assets and not have a payment. Not it really takes so much off the table. So we look at all those options, and then I actually do. It's called a total cost analysis, but it's basically a side by side analysis. So whatever your particular concerns are, say you're trying to decide between two different homes, like, do I want a
Yeah.
basic home, or am I going to keep my current home, which is worth $500,000, or am I going to sell it and buy one more in my price range, which is 250? We'll put side by sides, and we can
Yeah.
like take it all out. We'll look at all your costs, and you can see it. It's not just like a fee worksheet where you just like, this is how much the rate is, this is my payment, this is what the closing costs are. It's a live link. We move numbers around, and
Yeah.
it's really amazing. But what it does is it can give us a really accurate understanding of how that mortgage impacts us financially, like going forward. Like I can extrapolate out 4, 5, 10 years, like what is the real cost? And
Mhm.
so if you're coming up on retirement and you are trying to figure out if you're going to hold on to this mortgage, well, we know like your income's going to drop.
Right.
So do we need to refinance or buy something before you move, or before you retire, where you have your full income? So I look at all these questions, and then from there, in this situation where there's someone's working with you, we're not ready to move, but I can sit down and go, okay, well, these are what you need to consider. These are the options of,
Mhm.
like we'll narrow it down, and that will really help you craft like the rest of your separation agreement, having that information.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question. I mean, like that's the question that everybody wants to ask, but it's such a big question that it's hard to get the answer. Is what is it like? What's my money going to look like after divorce?
Mhm.
Like, how am I gonna? manage the day to day. And obviously, for most people, where you live is going to represent a big chunk of what you spend on a, monthly or yearly basis. So you want to make sure that you get into a situation that is sustainable and that doesn't leave you house poor, that gives you and your children, if you've got minor children living with you, or maybe even not minor children living
Yeah,
with you, but
our
what,
parents
yeah,
are.
yeah, our parents, so many of us are in a sandwich generation, caring for kids and caring for parents or in-laws.
That's
I guess
me.
that's, yeah, yeah, yeah. It can really spiral. And I mean, I worked on a case once where the mother-in-law stayed with my client after the
Oh,
divorce. Yeah. So I mean,
that's
it can be
great.
very, yeah, yeah. It can be I mean, sometimes once you're family, people stay family, even if the marriage doesn't work out. It's not always this nasty, acrimonious situation. And people go on to do all sorts of incredible things. But
Yeah.
I mean, definitely great advice. I mean, you can't look at the question of a house without considering the much bigger question of a lot of other pieces of a broader financial picture. And that's something that I think someone like Kimberly can bring to a conversation between you and your divorce attorney and can kind of add dimension to it and help make sure that you're, making responsible investment decisions, because there's no way to not look at a house as part of a larger investment portfolio. And I mean, I think it's important to still, be diversified. You don't want to put all your eggs in the real estate basket at the expense of retirement money or liquid savings and things like that. You want to make a decision that keeps all of those things in mind and then allows you to be in the best possible position both now and when you're at retirement age and beyond, because you have, years to go, and you want to make sure that you and your children are in the most secure position possible. But
Yeah.
all great pieces of advice. I mean, you've given lots of advice already, but do
Well, it's
you have?
very emotional. And so,
Yes.
in my past, the last time I bought the home before my divorce, we bought it from a woman who her children, when they divorced, they were almost out of high school, and she decided to keep the house. And it was a 4,600 square foot with on an acre. And I
Yeah.
get it. They'd lived there for 25 years, and that was their home, and that's where their kids grew up. She was desperate to get it, to sell it.
Yeah. Just
Just desperate,
overwhelmed.
overwhelmed. It was not, it needed a lot of work. She couldn't afford to do the work. So
Mm-hmm.
it's out on the market because it wasn't the prettiest thing in the world. And she could not wait. And frankly, that was one of the like an aha moment for me, knowing what I do. And then, a year later, I'm going through the same thing. And I'm like, this isn't right. That poor woman, I felt awful for her,
Yeah.
and walking her in her house afterwards, I'm like, I could see where she would have wanted to stay. And
Yeah.
but I think two people, women think, well, my kids will be really upset. They're already upset. And
We've always
there's a
celebrated Christmas here. We've always
right,
done, these things this way in this house.
right. But then they lose sight of the fact that it's, when your children are watching you struggle and they're watching you try
Mhm.
to maintain something that is different.
Yeah.
And now you're trying to do it on your own. Like that has its own cost and weight and to
Hmm.
be considered. And the home is the most emotional, is not always, but the home
I
is
think
an
it is.
extremely emotional part of the whole process.
Yeah,
And
it's always and it's impossible to remove emotion from the conversation entirely, but you do want to have a bigger discussion about like budget and what you need and what you want life to look like. And I mean, it's obviously it's relevant to consider what school system you're in, to consider who your neighbors are, where how close your family is, but you also don't want to bite off more than you can chew and put yourself in a worse position later. So, I mean, one thing I like to tell my clients too to consider three different options, like whether you keep the house and then two other like what if you look at an apartment, what if you look at another house you could buy in a different price range? What do those different monthly payments look like? What does your life look like? What extra money do you have? And do you want to keep this house at the expense of all else? Or do you want to choose something that gives you a little bit more freedom on a monthly basis so that you can travel? I mean, we really have to consider not just how you're living now, but what do you want for the future? What possibilities do you want to include in that future? And how do we structure your living arrangements so that the things that you want are possible? And and I think reframing it, not just like I'm going to lose my home and where these memories were made and where I brought my babies home from the hospital or whatever it is that's keeping you emotionally tied to that place, but centering your this future discussion on your hopes for the future and you want what you want that to look like. We can make memories anywhere. You're going to have the sense of security anywhere. Like it might not feel like that right this second, but choose something that gives you the freedom to live the way you want to live, because ultimately lifestyle is a big thing that leads people to divorce. Like incompatible people, you look around and you're suddenly like, who am I and what is it? This is not the life that I envision for myself. So what do you envision? How does that look? And how do we, reverse engineer to, create something like what you
Right.
want to live?
Right. And then, and numbers are not emotional, they're just not. It just,
Yeah.
they're clear, it concrete, and when
Mhm.
everything else seems complete chaos and
Yeah.
you're just so overwhelmed, they're specific.
Yeah, there's
You could
comfort in that
go,
too.
yeah, you can go like, oh, I really want this, but look at this number.
Yeah.
That's the number. That is truth. Like that is truth. That is
Yeah.
what it is. And okay, you can let that go. You
And
can
maybe
make
you
some
find it
different
doesn't make
decisions.
a big difference. I mean, we've been looking at houses lately too, and just thinking like if we were to move to a different school district, or if we were to do something different than what we're doing, and the way house prices have changed recently, and what interest rates are currently, like we could downgrade and still pay more in a mortgage. So, but
Right.
that's also a good fact to have on your side. Like that also can color these decisions. Like you said, the numbers are even if I'm not unemotional, the numbers are unemotional. So I can see very clearly like what that means for my life and make decisions accordingly. And I mean, that's all any of us can do is use the information that we have at hand to make the best decision that we possibly can under the circumstances. But I mean, I definitely think that's great advice. And just as my last question, Kimberly, I mean, we've talked about a ton of different pieces of advice, but do you have a specific piece of advice, like a key tip that you would gear towards women who are going through divorce as it relates to mortgages or real estate? Is there like one thing that stands out to you as like the best thing to do or the best piece of advice?
Oh gosh, that's
I
really a
know
hard
that's hard,
one.
right? That's hard.
Oh, there's so much. I think, like I said, I think it's really important to just have the conversation
Yeah.
because there's so much that people just don't know
Hmm.
about, different kinds of loans. And do I have to have alimony for a certain number of months before I can do anything? Like, will
Yeah.
you even have that time? Um, like I said about the first time home buyers, and a lot of women don't know you don't need 20% to buy a home. I with different financing at 100% all day long. But what does that need? What do people need to be able to do that? Like,
Hmm.
so I think that is just the most important part is especially knowing how you're going to live, like where you're going to live. That is just like, that is the very beginning
Hmm.
of building out everything else. Um, and if you just take it just like, what is my rate? And you're missing out on so many potential pitfalls and opportunities to really make sure you're making the most of your settlement.
Yeah.
You're asking for the right money from the right places. You're asking for the right amount of alimony. Like, I
Hmm.
need this much to make this happen.
But at
Uh,
least this much. We can always ask for
right,
more.
exactly. But you have to have a starting point, and
Yeah.
that is like taking that from like my home. What is that? Like, that is a really great place to start.
Hmm.
Um, so I guess that would be it.
So
So,
there's more to the real estate hunt than a pre-approval letter.
oh, yes. I mean, and there's just, we can look at, I don't know, if you own rental property, like what, like I strategize with people about how to, which ones to sell, which ones to keep, and
Mhm.
how will that affect your, I don't, like I said, I'm a nerd, I'm a mortgage nerd. I can
Yeah.
go on about it all day long.
Well, every
But
case is different and everybody's coming
yeah,
to the table with a different kind of like distribution of assets or, number of properties and some
exactly.
people don't have a house from the marriage, but they want to buy one after they get out, after the divorce is finalized. So you're still like looking at options and what does that look like? So it's not just whether we're talking about keeping a home that you have, you might not have one, but you might be looking to buy one.
Right. Yeah. There, like I said, there's a lot, and education is always the key. And the more knowledge you have, the more security you can have in your decisions. And, it's there's
Invaluable.
it's invaluable. It's invaluable. And I
Yeah.
think it's something obviously where nobody's ever taught about financing and what to do. But I think people really underestimate how important getting actual mortgage
Yeah.
education is in this. And I really want to change that.
I feel validated by that being the piece of advice too, because on the divorce side, that's exactly what I would say is you have to ask the questions, you have to get the answers, you have to find out what this might look like, and then start making decisions. Too many people just jump in head first without coming up with a plan. And I think that's always a mistake. There's so much emotionally going on and in terms of your mental health that might be going on. You don't want to jump in and ask questions later. You want to ask questions
Yeah.
now and then formulate a plan and execute it in a way that's going to put you and your kids in the best possible position over the long term. Thank you, Kimberly. That was such great information, such valuable information. I think everybody will be better off for having heard it. I'm going to include
Okay.
Kimberly's contact information so you can reach out to her if you want to schedule an appointment on the slide following the podcast if you want to reach out. But if you want to get more information about divorce, you can also check out our website at hofflaw.com. That's HOFLAW.com. We've got 4 free books, a number of free reports, blogs, and other resources that you can check out, as well as a divorce and custody seminar. So, again, feel free to check out our website. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. I appreciate you being here. And thanks to Kimberly. I really appreciate your insight.
No, absolutely. Anytime. I'm here to help.